All right, today we're going to get into a pretty interesting and, yeah, pretty controversial theory about modern dating. The basic idea that the signals we think are making us attractive might actually be attracting the exact opposite of what we're looking for. It's a really fascinating and, for some, a pretty challenging idea. So let's just dive right in.
So why do some high-achieving women seem to attract partners who are, well, kind of passive or dependent? This question is really at the heart of the whole theory we're looking at. It's a dynamic a lot of people talk about, right? The successful, driven woman who keeps ending up with partners who just don't seem to have that same fire. What's going on there? What's the pattern?
Okay, so let's frame this whole thing as a modern dating puzzle. Because for a lot of people, that's exactly what it feels like. It's a pattern that you hear about all the time, and the theory we're going to unpack today offers one pretty provocative explanation for why it might be happening. And here it is, the core claim of the whole thing. The theory says that some really successful women are, without even realizing it, attracting men who kind of want to be parented or led. The key word there is unintentionally. It's not a conscious choice. The idea is that the very same traits that make you a boss in your career could be attracting a more passive partner, and that creates this big mismatch. So you might be asking, how does this even happen? Well, the theory has a name for it: value signal miscalibration. I know, it sounds super academic and complicated, but trust me, the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. It all boils down to the signals we're sending out when we first meet someone.
So, what is value signal miscalibration? At its core, it just means that the traits you're putting out there, the ones you lead with, are basically out of sync with the kind of partner you actually want to attract. Think of it like this: your personal advertisement is attracting all the wrong customers. You're highlighting features that appeal to a totally different crowd than the one you're hoping to bring in.
Okay, and this is where the theory really starts to break things down. It splits attraction signals into two big buckets. On one side, you've got what it calls dominant signals. Stuff like independence, being assertive, being intellectually competitive. Then on the other side, you have complementary energy. Think warmth, receptivity, grace. The whole idea here is that these two categories act like opposite poles of a magnet, and they pull in very, very different kinds of people.
So, what's the mechanism behind all this? What's making this happen? Well, the theory calls it the principle of polarity. This is basically the fundamental rule that's supposed to explain how these different energies, the dominant and the complementary ones, actually interact when it comes to attraction. And this pretty much sums it up. Like, energy repels, complementary energy attracts. It's simple, almost like a law of physics for dating, according to this theory. The idea is that two of the same dominant energies, what the theory calls masculine-coded, they're going to push each other away in a romantic setting. But it's the complementary energies that create that spark, that magnetic pull.
Okay, so all of this leads to what the theory calls the selection effect. It's a three-step process. So step one, a woman leads with that strong, dominant, masculine-coded energy. Then, step two, this vibe apparently repels other self-led, traditionally masculine guys. The ones who aren't looking for another leader at home. And here's the kicker. Step three, that same energy then becomes a magnet for more passive men, the ones who are actually looking for someone to create that structure for them. So who exactly is attracted by these dominant signals according to this idea? Well, it's not another go-getter, apparently. It's men who are more go with the flow. Maybe men who are, consciously or not, looking for a second mom, or guys who are just perfectly comfortable living inside a structure that their partner builds. That's the profile.
Now, it's really important to get some context here. This theory isn't just floating out in space. It's actually pushing back against a lot of that lean-in advice that tells women to be more like a man to win, not just in the boardroom, but in dating too. This framework basically says, nope, that's a flawed strategy, if your goal is to attract a complementary, traditionally masculine partner.
So, why are we even talking about this? Does this signaling stuff really matter? Well, according to this theory, the stakes are huge. We're not just talking about whether you get a second date. We're talking about the entire foundation and the future of your relationship. And you can see the two paths laid out right here. If you got misaligned signaling, the theory says you're headed for a constant power struggle, a never-ending contest for who's in charge, which just wears down the attraction over time. But if the signaling is aligned, that's the path to harmony, a true partnership where you're, as they put it, co-building a shared throne together. So, the theory is pretty black and white about this. It's not a spectrum. It's two distinct paths, and the one you end up on is decided by the signals you lead with from the very beginning. But we all know that real life and real relationships are way more complicated than that. So what are the problems with this idea? What are the counterpoints?
All right, let's be real. No single theory is ever going to perfectly explain something as messy and beautiful as human attraction. So it's absolutely crucial that we look at the risks and the counterpoints here. And to be fair, a lot of these are things the source material itself points out. Let's get into the critical side of things.
And these are some really important things to think about. First off, this whole framework is kind of built on the idea that you want a traditional polarity. So if you're looking for a more egalitarian, 50-50 kind of partnership, this might not apply at all. It also risks putting traits into these really rigid gender boxes. I mean, is ambition really a masculine signal? A lot of people would say no way. And finally, you've got to remember, this is all about that initial attraction, that spark. It doesn't have as much to say about the nitty-gritty, complex stuff that makes a relationship last for years.
So, at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Is this theory a genuine key to unlocking relational harmony, or is it a risky oversimplification of human connection that just leans too hard on old-school gender roles? That's really the big question here, and there's no easy answer. It's definitely something to chew on.